adventure, intrigue, lost cities, ancient mysteries, and more on this week's episode of East10 Investigates. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the East10 Outpost. I'm Cody, and I'm going to be your guide today into a subject that we all love, but interpret very differently. See, I started my channel as a genuine exploration into the ancient past to better my understanding of where we came from, so I can help guide where we're going, as a father, as a husband, and as a responsible member of society. It's up to me, and it's up to all of you watching, to be an active participant in every way, shape, and form in this great experience we call the human existence. See, we all leave a footprint, some big, some small, and if we don't know the footprints around us and the footprints that came previous, we are making unguided steps. And if you look around lately at the state of the world, it kind of seems like we've just been fumbling our way through the dark as a species. Sure, there's advancements here and there, but not in any way that meaningfully betters the human existence. So we need to learn from the mistakes of the past to change this cycle. So everybody should be interested in history and getting to the truth of it. But history is plagued by an unfortunate concept. It's his story. It's the victor's story. The guy who wins gets to write down what happened. It's his story of events. And it's up to archaeology and science to try and weed through the story of it all to find out what's actually fact. But there's an issue with that as well. A lot of it's open to interpretation. Much like modern art, which for the life of me I don't understand, it's open for interpretation. People see different things. I see blots on a piece of paper, but others see millions of dollars worth of value, and that's okay. But unfortunately, history isn't much different. We can all look at the same pyramid or the same carving and interpret it many different ways. And while you can do science on some things to carbon date or dig in the ground around to find proof of a historical record of inhabitation which can be dated, the fact of the matter is, on a lot of things, we don't actually know. So two people can sit and look at the pyramid and both make reasonable arguments for how old it might actually be. And that's an issue. Because if we can't sort out what's what, how do we know what's the truth? So, in my journey, I've learned a few things from looking at a variety of personalities from all over the spectrum. And I've made this video as sort of a reference guide for people like me, the layman's, the people who just enjoy this. I'm here to have fun. I'm here to learn. And I think if you're watching this, you probably are too. So let's take a look at some of the things I've learned along the way, examining hardline historians, academic alternatives, and pseudoscientists. So when I started my journey, I figured the best place to start would be right at the beginning, the mainstream sources. So I took a look at Flint Dibble and David Miano. They're two archaeologists that have impeccable pedigree, and they've been chosen as something of figureheads for the community as a whole. They frequently get put forth as means of representation or pointed to when asked questions or countered about certain things. So I figured of anybody, these gentlemen would be the best place to start. And they were. They were fantastic. Their content is incredibly interesting. And without a doubt, there's a lot to learn there. These gentlemen are specialists in their fields, and you can tell. They're incredibly intelligent, and it oozes into every bit of knowledge that they're putting forth in their videos. But so does something else. And the more content I watched from these gentlemen, the more I felt oozing into their content. And that was ego.
See, after a while, they start to sound like the teacher who just lectures you. If you raise your hand and you ask a question because you genuinely want to know something, or you're viewing it a little different than how it's been told to you, and the teacher scorns you or mocks you or implies that you're an idiot for having felt that way, that level of hubris is unfortunately sprinkled over all of their content. Flint Dibble even recently made a video that was specifically kind of weeding into the waters of conspiracy theorists, and the manner in which he discusses it and laughs about it is it's not just alienating to people, it's off-putting, and it, for me, turned me off of what they had to say. And that led me down a different path. Alternative academics. Now, when I say alternative academics, allow me to define what I mean. There are people who are pedigreed and still, for some reason, rejected by the mainstream academic crowd. There are people like Robert Schoch that, despite being a doctor, is still ostracized because of his controversial work. And when I looked at the official work from credible archaeologists and historians, and the hubris began to annoy me, I looked at what they were saying about these people who had different ideas than they did. People who have the same level of training, the same level of expertise, and the same pedigree on paper. What made them pseudoscientists or false archaeologists or any of the many names that have been applied to some of these people? And that fascinated me because these men were just following science. Things that could be tested, things that could be peer-reviewed. Dr. Schoch has looked at the dating of the pyramids and the Sphinx, and what he's found goes against the mainstream narrative. And that becomes especially problematic when, for seemingly no good reason from an outside perspective, he's getting attacked over science. If you're a man of science and he's a man of science, what's the issue? I began to feel almost like there was something at play. Because it's almost like thou doth protesteth too much. And there seemed to be a lot of that happening. So I started looking in anthropology. I've come across Luke Caverns, who does fantastic in-the-field research on the Maya and on the people who lived there and their cultures and what that was like. I've looked at Robert Sepehr and some of his work, which is incredibly controversial, but some of it makes a lot of sense. But just because he dares to challenge the mainstream narrative, and even Luke to some degree, there's pushback from the primary academic community. And it's something that then pushed me a little further. And I wanted to know why. What are these things? Because we've got men of science on this side saying one thing, men of science on this side seeing a different possibilities of things or events. So what are people who are looking into this in a big way? What are they seeing? What are they saying? So that led me to the pseudoscientists. So what is a pseudoscientist per modern academia's terms? Well, it can almost be anything. Anybody who posits a anti-mainstream narrative or dares to speculate on something beyond the official written history, well, they're ostracized and they're labeled as a pseudoscientist, or in some cases even a white supremacist. Ask Graham Hancock, somebody who frequently gets those titles. But why? When you listen to them and you look into what they're talking about, it's very logical. When ancient advanced technology is thrown around, it's frequently laughed at as notions of laser beams or old world lightsaber technology they were using to cut these blocks, or many outrageous things, even so much as aliens. Ancient Aliens is a pseudoscience show that discusses real science, real history, and injects a colorful amount of their own view. And I'm going to be honest, I personally love the show. It's great entertainment value. But that's all that it is. And we'll get back to that. But for now, pseudoscience. It eludes me because it's almost too broad of a category. You have people like Randall Carlson being thrown in there. And he's a completely pedigreed and credible man who's incredibly wise. And anybody who listens to him speak will understand he's a genius. So why are people like this being labeled with pseudoscience? Well, because they posit that the human story is more interesting and more fascinating than mainstream modern academia would have us believe. And that's problematic. And I'll tell you why. I don't think the reason is any sort of large conspiracy, just like they think that ancient alternative history theorists think that there was ridiculous technology. It's actually much more mundane. See, a lot of people posit when they say advanced technology, things that in our modern day we view as mundane or old technology, but it is still advanced technology. Take Matt Bealls, for instance. Matt has done incredible work on the vases, as has Ben from Uncharted X. They've worked with actual metrologists to scan these vases and determine how precision accurate they were. But at no point in time did they posit laser beams were cutting these or anything incredibly advanced. In fact, what their work shows evidence of is things like the lathe, which we're told wasn't around during dynastic Egypt. But this shows signs of obviously using a lathe when you look at it. And that is ancient advanced technology. See, modern academia posits things like the pyramid granite blocks were carved using copper chisels. Copper is a much softer material than granite. So that notion, if you think about it practically, becomes laughable. There's not enough copper in the world to keep up. So why is this called pseudoscience? Well, it's called white supremacy too. It's called a lot of things. And really it's to protect from any sort of devolving off the narrative. See, professionals in academia are making a living being professionals in academia, defending their post. They've gone to school for a long time to become experts in their field. They've paid a lot of money to have the degree that they have. And so, rightfully, they feel very proud of it. They're very protective of it. And anything that undermines what they do, what they've known, and what they've poured their life and soul into, they view it as an affront to not just the subject, but them personally. Just like anybody who goes against alternative academics. They view it as an attack against them personally. And then when you get to the pseudoscientists like Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson, well, they view it as an attack against them personally. And so I realized something very important. Everybody has something to offer. See, whether it was Dr. Miano or Dr. Dibble, or it was Robert Sepehr or Luke Caverns, or it was Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson. Every one of these gentlemen were incredibly intelligent, well-spoken, and educated me in something I didn't know previously. They furthered my understanding of history. But if any one of these sources were used as a sole source, well, it would probably be to my detriment. Because everybody's a human being. On an internal level, we all have work to do. We all have bias that shows. We all have particular thoughts, particular inclinations, and particular trains of thought that lead to our way of being. Ways that we would posit are the correct ways. So, as individuals, as consumers, it's up to us to sort through what everybody has to offer. And to the content creators out there, I would offer you this. There are a lot of people, just like myself, who are very curious. The history is fascinating, and there is a ravenous hunger for it right now, almost more than I've ever seen my entire life. And I've always been interested in watching Ancient Aliens and things of that nature. I enjoy Billy Carson, The Fifth Kind, all sorts of programmers and content creators like Gaia, because they're storytellers. Just like the Bible, the Enuma Elish, the Popol Vuh, there are things in our stories, our human stories, that we can all take something from, we can all glean from, we can all learn from. And more is more. So the more that we open our mind, the more that we put our best foot forward when interacting with individuals in online spaces, the more that we can control and check our own ego, our own hubris, and understand that we all share the same passion. The more we can understand, and the more that we can evolve as a species. You like staring at old rocks, and I like staring at old rocks. Let's look at them together. Let's play in the sandbox nice. And let's all have open, polite, intelligent conversation, because that is how we discover. That is the scientific process. So, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully this wasn't too much of a ramble or too much of a departure from my usual content, but it's something that I've seen as a growing issue in the community, and it's something that, from my layman seat, my simpleton perspective, my outsider view, I wanted to offer to the community, for people like myself who are fumbling their way through the path of truth, trying to find what's really the story. Because history, remember, will always just be his story. It's written by the victor, and it's up to you to go through as many sources as possible, from the obscure to the mainstream, from the outlandish to the logical, and use your discernment. Sort out what feels right. Use knowledge, information, and what's available to inform your opinions. And no matter what, approach the world with kindness, understanding, and an open mind. It'll go a long way for us. I'll see you next time back here at the Outpost for another East 10 Investigates. But until then, stay curious, my friends.